Retro.
Hi, this is Fred Tatasciore, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. The Force is strong with both of them.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we have another episode of the Clone Wars as part of our ongoing rewatch of the series. But before we get into that, Jay, you want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media?
My pleasure as always, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. Dish is line, signals boosted to maximum output, shields down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we're going to be discussing episode 20 from season 3, which is called Citadel Rescue. And it is the final episode in the Citadel arc. Before we get into this, I can detect how nasally I sound right now. I'm getting over a bit of a cold. So hope everyone will just bear with me here as we get through this. It's been going on for a few days, and I think I'm getting over the hump. But next couple episodes may sound like this. With that having been said, Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the summary for this episode, please?
Absolutely. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka still find themselves on the run as they attempt to escape with Jedi Master Evan Piell and Captain Tarkin from the Citadel with the coordinates to the Nexus route. The prison warden, under pressure from Count Dooku, relentlessly pursues them across the volcanic terrain. As the Republic rescue effort draws near, Osi Sobeck launches an all-out assault on the Jedi, and Master Piell suffers a fatal wound. Before he becomes one with the Force, he passes on his half of the coordinates to Ahsoka. Once the rescue is complete, the Jedi find themselves at an impasse with Captain Tarkin, who will only reveal his half of the coordinates to the Chancellor, while Ahsoka promised only to deliver her coordinates to the Jedi Council.
Yeah, so there we have it. The conclusion of the Citadel arc. Goodbye, everyone. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so this is, again, it's the conclusion of the 3-episode arc. It's a very dark arc when it comes down to it. We've talked about the various deaths that have occurred and how brutal this place is over the past couple episodes. What did you think about this episode overall and the conclusion to the arc?
Well, this entire arc has really made me contemplate what I guess you could say the motives are behind the storyline itself, because it's much more layered than just the action. And so we've been saying this for the last couple of episodes, and this one really concludes with, not only do we have this constant scramble for them to get out of here, but it makes you see how they're framing these characters for later on, for where they end up. And it's not just one or two characters. There's a lot of them that really, the implications of things like, for example, last episode with, Echo, quote unquote, dying, and then where does that leave Fives and Rex as clone troopers, and how their deaths are being treated versus where Ahsoka ends up and where Tarkin ends up and where Anakin ends up. And so there's just a lot of moving parts in this. And so it's a lot more layered than I ever really gave it credit for. And and it's, there's also this shift in the way that things are being presented too. So as we break this down, we'll talk about it more, obviously, but I don't want to give away too much right now. So, but good episodes, good arc. What'd you think?
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking episode. It's a thought-provoking arc, and I liked it quite a bit. For whatever reason, it just hasn't quite garnered the iconic status of many of the other arcs that have been in the series. And maybe that's just because of where it fell in the series at the end of season 3 compared to like Mortis was in the middle. Some of the other trilogies of episodes that we've talked about in the past, but I really like this one. And with having had the opportunity to analyze as much Star Wars as we've had while doing this podcast over the last 6.5 years, I'm now noticing some other things and thinking about Star Wars in ways that I hadn't before. And so some of those thoughts will come up if I remember those topics as we get through the discussion here. Let's just get into the conversation. I like it, but I've got more specific thoughts that I want to get into. And
Me too.
yeah, so as you were talking about last time, the prison warden, Osi Sobeck, and the featurette on StarWars.com for this episode deals with him specifically, and you get to see James Arnold Taylor recording lines as Osi. And Filoni is talking about how James did a really great Christopher Walken impression, and so they used that for the basis of the character and then fleshed it out from there. They didn't want a one-for-one Christopher Walken. I mean, could you imagine? It's like, how dare you escape
Right.
from my prison?
Good job.
Don't do it great. Well, I only do okay on that. I hadn't really thought about what I was going to say, so it didn't come out great. But regardless, so that was interesting, and this is a new character. But the other thing that kind of stands out to me about Sobeck here is that the amount of pressure that he is under from Count Dooku to recapture Evan Piell and Tarkin and get those Nexus route coordinates, to the point that Dooku is saying things to him like, you're lucky to be alive right now. But and that, I guess, explains why the warden himself at the end of this episode is on a staff pursuing them, as opposed to sitting up in his control room directing his droids and things like that. He becomes that desperate to get this mission done. But what did you think about that character overall in this episode?
Oh yeah, it's obvious that the way that the entire power hierarchy, if you will, is being proposed from the separatist point of view is obviously fear. And so it's so much different obviously than what the Jedi are doing with the way that they encourage leadership and the way that their ranks are developed in that way. And with Osi, even Dave Filoni was saying that they put the little tick in his eye, like the little twinge,
Yeah.
because he is under so much pressure and he is so desperate basically to make sure that he is doing what he needs to do, because the consequences of that, as you pointed out, could potentially be just being eliminated. So there's nothing more high stakes than having to succeed for him. So, and that's also kind of lays the groundwork even for the way that the Empire operates later on. I mean, you think about where Anakin ends up as Darth Vader, that intimidation and the threat of violence, that constant threat of you better do this or else, is there. So it's kind of a foreshadowing, in some ways from that regard. But I did love the featurette because seeing James Arnold Taylor, he looks so young.
Yeah, didn't he?
Not that he looks old now, but we're talking a lot of years ago. And so it was just really
2011.
cool.
I mean,
yeah, it was really cool to see him.
Right. Well, and we've kept up with his career, and we've heard him on his podcast. We've met him at conventions since then. And,
Right.
We were 15 years younger when this came out.
Right.
So, I mean, we've all aged quite a bit, but, we're just used to seeing these actors and, Ashley Eckstein, Matt Lantern, Sam Witwer, all the people associated with the Clone Wars. So, we've grown up as Star Wars fans and podcasters for the past 2 decades with these people. And so just, we think of them at a different, we don't notice the changes much. And then all of a sudden we get these shots of them from that long ago. And it's like, oh, wow. Okay. We're not the only ones that aged. So anyway, one of the things that was interesting to me also about OC is that towards this episode, he's gotten so frustrated and so stressed that when he corners them on that island, which is going to be the evacuation point where the mission Plo Koon's leaving to rescue them, but he gets there and he picks up Tarkin and basically says, if I can't have the coordinates, then no one can, they'll die with you. And he's about ready to throw Tarkin in the lava there. But there's other things that we'll talk about that scene with other characters here in just a second. But I mean, what does that say? Because he was given a directive, get those coordinates for me. And he basically decided that, well, if if I can't have them, then nobody can have them. And I don't think that was really an option that was being presented to him by Dooku, which was that it was only one option, which is get me the coordinates, not make sure the Republic doesn't get them. Just get me the coordinates there.
Right. I think he was just so desperate at that point that he kind of lost it
Mm-hmm.
and almost like a madman. And that kind of leads up from when he was having that little nervous tick too, because his stress was just starting to get to him. And so it's kind of a throw your hands up and give up maneuver, but not in a very good way because obviously Dooku's not going to be very happy with that if
Yeah.
he did survive, which obviously he did not.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, what do you have to lose, I guess, in that case?
Yeah, exactly.
How about dire straits? But okay. So moving on, the reprogrammed battle droids make their final stand. And I don't know what to think about this. We were talking about them in our past 2 episodes covering the Clone Wars and how we kind of like them better than the regular battle droids, how they aren't nearly as annoying. And so they get the orders to hold off the separatists, mainly the separatist droids, so that they can make their escape down the side of a ravine, as they try to get to this island. And one of the battle droids turns to R2D2 and says, it's been an honor serving under you, sir. And then they turn around to take on the battle droids and last for like 5 seconds there.
Hmm.
I don't even know what to ask you, Jay, on this. I mean, it just seemed like, okay, that was cool, but did all that feel earned? Did the scene? I mean, they put up practically no resistance to the other droids, the droid onslaught against them there. I guess on one hand, we had to have a resolution about what happened to these droids, but I just don't feel like this scene hit the mark. Of everything I liked about this episode, I think this was a miss. But what did you think?
Yeah, I liked the way that they gave R2 their little send off, as you said, when they said, "It's
Mhm.
been an honor serving under you, sir." And I guess if nothing else, you hit it on the head is that there needed to be a resolution for, why they weren't with them any longer.
Mhm.
But in a way, it kind of mirrors the very unceremonial way that the clones were dropping off like flies during the episode. You know what I mean? So they weren't really treated much differently than the clones and vice versa. But yeah, I think it's just the fact that they just needed that resolution and it was kind of a tender moment to give themselves up that way because they said something all for one and then nothing.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, there was nothing earned in that scene. It was
Mhm.
so fast, and
Mhm.
I mean, I don't. While there was some comedy between these droids and stuff like that, it's not like we had the opportunity for R2 to be like, acknowledge it's not like R2 regretted sending them off to their doom or anything. There was nothing that in R2's reaction. Granted, we can't understand anything R2 is saying, and 3PO is not around to translate what he's saying in this episode. But it's just kind of like if we were supposed to be impacted by their sacrifice, I just don't feel like this hit the mark on it at
Mhm.
all on this. And it was, it's like, it was an honor serving under you. And then, like you said, they turned around and seconds later they were gone in that case. So, I get it. There's a lot to be accomplished in these episodes, and they only have about 22, 23 minutes to do it. So they couldn't invest a whole lot of time. But it just kind of feels like you might as well have just had them get shot down in the overall escape of things rather than giving us that scene at all, because I just don't
Mhm.
think it really achieved anything.
Mhm. No, I get what you're saying, and
Mm.
R2 is such a quiet presence in this episode specifically. He's there, but then he's kinda not, and he's in the background, and then all of a sudden he's there, and then, he gets off the planet obviously with them, but he's definitely not a focal point for sure.
Right. So in another moment, Marcio and Ro would like to have a word because Saesee Tinn says to Plo Koon that they haven't seen anything like this since the Old Republic.
Yeah.
And I say this tongue in cheek, obviously, because no one was thinking about the High Republic in the late
Mhm.
2000s, early 2010s. And so, this was very much the state of things with the Star Wars galaxy when they made this episode. But it just says like, oh, okay. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate here. This line is here because you've now developed a whole nother era later. And what do they want to, I don't expect anything of them, but it just, as big a fans of the High Republic as we were, this just kind of stood out to me. It's like, I'm pretty sure the High Republic was a big, big deal.
So what do you think was the impetus for that particular statement? It just seemed like it was dropped casually, but I feel like nothing is ever dropped that casually. So what do you think it was in reference to specifically? Anything?
Well, the old Republic, they make a note of this in the episode guide. If you go through the gallery of images, that the war between the Jedi and the Sith was like the defining conflict of the old Republic here. And so, I also think we also have to think about the line that they always would highlight for movies. It was Obi-Wan Kenobi saying, for 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights have been the defenders of peace in the Republic. And so I think what they're just kind of building on that sentiment that for so
Mhm.
long, the Jedi have not been warriors. And that's something Anakin talks about in this episode as well. But that they've been defenders of peace. They've snuffed out things before they've blown up into big conflicts. And that's been going so long but now they have this full. Saesee Tinn, this is a character like we're really getting for the first time in the Clone Wars, this trilogy of episodes. And so he's reflecting on something and he's making a statement to Plo Koon. I like the interaction where we have our non-big three, some Jedi from our non-big three interacting and talking about these type of things. But it's just kind of one of those offhanded world building type of comments, I think is what it was intended to be. It's of course been overridden since then, but there we are.
Mhm. And speaking of Jedi that we don't typically see, they used a lot of different assets in this
Mhm.
particular episode as far as Jedi go. With animation, you don't always see all of them, at once. We had, as you said, Saesee Tiin, Plo Koon, we had Ali Gadia, Kit Fisto. They all made an appearance, which
Yeah.
that made an impression on me because there's quite a few again, moving parts that were all over the place. So you do get the feeling that, wow, this is a very, very important thing to have these coordinates. And there's so many masters that are, part of this. And that just sort of even hit that point home even more.
Right, right. Well, it gets back to what they told us the Clone Wars is going to be before it actually came out, which was that they were going to be exploring the Clone Wars from the time of Attack of the Clones to Revenge of the Sith, and that we're going to be getting stories from all these different Jedi. And then they refocused to primarily pay attention to Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka over time, which is fine because we love those characters, and Rex and Yoda, was a big one who's a routine, but Aayla Secura was a big deal for 2 episodes in the first
Hmm.
season, and then not so much after that. Luminara Unduli, again, a couple episodes is featured, not so much after that. And so we're getting more Jedi, and that's cool. But they gave up on the whole idea of showing us the scope of the war to mainly focus on a few stories to give us a tighter thing, and that worked for the Clone Wars. That's one of the reasons why we all love Ahsoka so much. In this, if we'd only seen her 2 or 3 times over the course of any given season, would she be the character that she is today? Probably not. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And another thing that hits me about and I don't know why it hits me in this particular episode more so than maybe some others, but that you really get the feeling that the shift is happening in the ideology of the Jedi. Because even the fortune cookie where they had without honor, victory is hollow.
Right.
And so, yeah, so there's a lot of things that lean into that, but this really gets into the idea of how heroism is framed. So I
Mhm.
think before this, there was so much more of an emphasis on the Jedi being those defenders of peace. They had honor, they looked after people, they were the defenders. And now it seems like everybody's fighting over knowledge. So the shift is happening from sacrifice and survival to now who has the information that can gain the power. You know what I mean?
I think so. And there's a lot of discussion in this episode. And they started the discussion in the last episode about what is the appropriate role for the Jedi in this
Mm-hmm.
conflict. And we made sure to mention that when we discussed the last episode, how Anakin agrees with Tarkin that the Jedi code is what's holding the Jedi back from actually achieving victory in this war. It doesn't allow them to go far enough. But Anakin does point out that the Jedi are not intended to be soldiers in
Mm-hmm.
this war, and that perhaps this isn't the best role for them. So, despite the fact that he agrees with Tarkin, it's not like he's advocating for the Jedi to change their code to pursue things, but he is tempted a little bit. In getting back to the fortune cookie, it's mirrored at the end of this episode when Obi-Wan is kind of cautioning Anakin about, not giving up on the honor to pursue the end of the war, that they got to be true to themselves in that
Right.
regard here.
Right. Yeah, and you
Yeah.
can see how uncomfortable Obi-Wan is in seeing Anakin really aligning with Tarkin
Mhm.
and, kind of questioning, okay, gosh, what am I seeing here sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. One of the other things that stands out is Ahsoka ultimately is the one that kills Osi Sobeck. And it gets back to that scene we were talking at the beginning where Sobeck is holding Tarkin above his head and about to throw him into the lava, and then Ahsoka stabs him through the back. And
Yeah.
the featurette, Dave Filoni points out, this is the only second time we've seen a Jedi do something like this. The first was Anakin earlier in the Clone Wars when he stabbed Senator Merrick from Mandalore through the back when he was kind of threatening Satine and Obi-Wan on the ship. And so the point being is like, okay, of course Ahsoka is Anakin's student, but that's kind of an un-Ahsoka-like thing to do in that
Mhm.
situation. That, is that really the only way to have saved Tarkin in that instance?
Yeah, it's like, "It's not the Jedi way." And then
Mhm.
for Tarkin to turn around, and basically tell Anakin, "You've taught a Padawan well."
Mhm.
Like, so he obviously knew that Anakin has probably used that tactic before, because why would Ahsoka do something like that? Which is kind of interesting because Tarkin never really appreciated Ahsoka from the very beginning.
Oh,
And
no.
so, yeah, so it's like, you liking me now, Tarkin kind of thing. But
Oh,
I
just
don't
wait
know
till we get into
how.
season 5, right? I mean,
Oh, I
that's
know.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
But I kind of go back and forth with Ahsoka because obviously she is still so young and she shows her age quite a lot here in this episode because there's that one scene where Tarkin is saying something and Ahsoka's like rolling her eyes and like kind of
Mhm.
thing behind, like, so he's not seeing her, so she's still obviously very immature in a lot of ways, and just the fact that she's there when she's not supposed to be, and but then giving that completely brutal ending to Osi Sobeck in such a way that it didn't even phase her. She just impales him and then pulls the lightsaber out and almost has to like duck from underneath him as he's falling on top of her and then just kind of walks away.
I
It's
would
kind of
like to have
chilling.
seen I'd like to have seen more of a reaction or reflection on that because,
Right. Because she's
you
normally
know
so like expressive.
right, but yeah, and she's normally destroying droids, not
Hmm.
people, in
Right.
this case. So it was a big moment. Again, we're dealing with about 22, 23 minutes of screen time. There's a lot for them to cover in this episode, so I can understand, maybe that's something that had to get cut, but it doesn't ever get addressed again in this. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
okay. Well, so Evan Piell becomes one with the Force over the course of this episode. He gets attacked by Anooba, which I thought was very talk about timing. We spent a lot
Yeah,
of time talking
that
about the
too.
Anooba and the Mandalorian and Grogu in our
Yep.
last couple episodes, and now we got Anubas here in this episode. But so he gets mauled by an Anuba, and before he passes away, he passes on his half the code to Ahsoka and tells her to only give it to the Jedi Council. Okay, that's great. Couple things about that. One, this was one of those cracks in the continuity before the expanded universe ever got set aside as Legends, because prior to this, there was a trilogy of books called Coruscant Nights. And they had 3 of them. And Evan Piell was in the first book as the master to the main character. And he ended up, this is, months after Order 66. He's been on Coruscant, but he finally gets tracked down by stormtroopers and killed in that book. So years later, and they completely overrode that here in the Clone Wars. So it just kind of shows you, I don't want to necessarily say disdain, but George Lucas was never afraid to set aside anything that happened in the expanded universe if it got in the way of the story that he wanted to tell. And
Right.
that happened right here.
Yeah, case in point for sure.
Yeah. And second, after Evan Piell gives the coordinates, his half the coordinates to Ahsoka, we got the split that you listed in our summary, that Tarkin's orders are only to give the coordinates to Chancellor Palpatine, and Ahsoka swore to Piell that she would only give the coordinates to the Jedi Council. And at the end of the episode, Yoda's like, well, I'll go talk to the Chancellor and we'll figure out what's best to do. And of course, we know what happens at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. The Separatists launch a surprise attack on Coruscant that the Republic did not see coming. How did that happen? Well, it's not a novel, but it is kind of like an in-universe reference book. Battles that changed history suggests that Sidious got a hold of both sets of the coordinates and gave them to Grievous to stage his attack on Coruscant. So, yeah, I looked that up because I was wondering about that. It's like, because we all know that this was a lightning fast attack that no one was suspecting. Well, how could he have pulled it off? And I was wondering if this Nexus Route had to do anything about it. So I looked it up on Wikipedia and they gave me the source for that. And I don't have that book, but I want to check it out to see what it has to say about that.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, it just goes to show how all of these stories that intertwine really do weave such an intricate tapestry of information that is just, yeah, it blows your mind when you think about all of the ways that these things are interconnected.
Right. What did you think about Plo Koon covering for Ahsoka? Because as the episode's winding down, Anakin says there on the platform on Coruscant, before everyone splits up and goes their own ways, like, Master, Plo, we have to know, did you assign Ahsoka to this mission? And his response is something along the lines, apparently I did.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not the same. I mean, that's so evasive. And if I'm Anakin and I really cared about that answer and I needed to know so that I could properly guide / discipline my apprentice, no way am I letting him get away with that statement. What do you mean apparently you did?
Right.
Either you did or you didn't. So what is it? But anyway, what's your takeaway from that?
Oh, this frustrates me so much, quite honestly, because it just goes to show, especially where Ahsoka, and again, this is kind of what I was alluding to in the beginning when I was talking about my reactions, is that where these characters end up. And when you think about the whole situation with Ahsoka in season 5 and the way that everything ended up with her, and the fact that, okay, so certain things are okay when they are convenient to the outcome of whatever these masters want, kind of thing. And not only that, but even Evan was saying along the lines of, when Ahsoka reveals to him in his dying breaths that I wasn't even supposed to be here. And he says, well, now you've become one of the most important parts of this mission, kind of thing. So I think that's something that Plo Koon probably picked up on, because obviously she ended up with the coordinates. And so it was almost saving her and saving face for him. But if I was Anakin, I would be ticked, because I mean, it's obvious that something was undermined somewhere and he wasn't being kept in the loop about something again. And so it's just this kind of vicious circle for Anakin of power and struggle. And, it's just, I don't know. It's just, yeah, I was not a fan of that at all. But what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, here's the thing. It's not like Ahsoka is saying it was the will of Force for me there. I had a vision. The Force was telling me to go. None of those type of arguments. It was I wanted to go on this mission. and she lied to Anakin about being assigned to this mission. And as you're suggesting, it's a total the ends justify the means type of an argument. We don't know how this would have played out if she hadn't been on that mission. There were several
Mhm.
parts that she was indeed helpful, but come on, it's Anakin and Obi-Wan. Who's
Right.
to say that they couldn't have come up with other ways of overcoming all this on their own? And maybe Ahsoka would have been part of the relief effort if it came down to that.
Mhm.
And she would end up there. But instead, Plo Koon covers for her. And I don't think it has anything to do with him thinking the Force is telling me to do this. It is, he is the Jedi that retrieved her when she was a child and brought her to the temple.
Mhm.
They have a connection. I don't want to call it an attachment, but there is a connection. And so he covered for her based on that alone. And I don't know that did anybody any favors. It could
Right.
be totally that, yes, it was fortuitous that she was there on that mission and it helped achieve a positive result. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be repercussions for disobeying orders from her master at the same time.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that
Mhm.
kind of bugged me.
Yep, we are definitely in agreement there.
Right. One last thing that I want to bring up, and then if there's anything else you want to bring up, you can do it as well. But it occurred to me when I'm watching this, and this planet, which is Liasu or something, I can't remember what it's called, but I just keep thinking of the Citadel world, and we get these great distant shots of it, how half the planet is missing. It's gone through a
Yeah.
disaster. And what's left of the planet when we get to the surface is a lot of these lava type rivers and things like that. Very much like Mustafar.
Mhm.
And so it's not the place like Mustafar is where Anakin is baptized by fire. Goes from Jedi being to a Sith. But it does not escape me that it's Mustafar light in that way, where as you were suggesting earlier, this is a planet where he starts thinking about other ways of doing things. While he may not be advocating for the Jedi to avoid the code, he does recognize the point that Tarkin is making. Now, Tarkin's not a Sith, but he's definitely somewhere on the other end of the scale, leaning towards that much more of a Sith type ideology things there. And so I don't know. I don't know if that was an intended metaphor or symbolism on behalf of Filoni and George Lucas and stuff like that by giving this word and having Anakin start thinking about these things. But I can't dismiss it either. But anyway, what do you think of that observation?
Yeah, well, we've pointed out so many times the use of water in
Mhm.
Star Wars in different ways that the baptismal type rite has been sort of used as, metaphors and symbolism and that type of thing. Well, if you think about it, Anakin's baptism has always been by fire. So every time we see some sort of a transformation or a question for Anakin as far as um his philosophies and where he stands with things, it seems like there's always some sort of fire or lava or something either within the world building or, of course with Revenge of the Sith, like literally he's baptized by fire in that way.
Mhm.
But, I've just noticed that that has been sort of a theme for him in the Clone Wars when they visited different places and there's been a question about his honor, his philosophies, or his thinking.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it was just unescapable this time. It's a similar type of a planet. Now, he didn't suffer any big wounds. He himself did not commit any like super egregious acts while he's on this planet, the way he did when he was on Mustafar, or just prior to going to Mustafar, like when he slaughtered the Jedi at the temple on Coruscant, including the younglings and stuff like that. But again, it's a light version of what happened on Mustafar here, and so
Sure.
he's here on this planet, and I guess it doesn't you know, or we shouldn't escape notice of what this planet was. It was co-developed by the Jedi as a place they would send Jedi that had lost their way. I don't. I've had some opportunity to think about this since we talked about the first episode 2 weeks ago. I don't think what the Citadel is now is what the Jedi intended, or probably even designed it to be when they made it. It's been corrupted by both people in the Republic and the Separatists since then. It probably
Mhm.
had plenty of security features in there. Or maybe it was designed not just for Jedi, but for Darksiders that they find. because the Jedi aren't just necessarily going to kill anyone that they see using the dark side of the Force. They may send them here to try and what happened to this planet? When did it exactly split like this? A lot of this stuff
Mhm.
might have happened as well. So, at any rate, it's an environment that I think is conducive to being a link in the chain on Anakin's transformation.
Yes, definitely, because, I mean, we even saw it in the Mortis arc too,
Yeah.
when the son was involved in his lair. So, in this episode, Anakin is being faced with Tarkin and kind of thinking about, "Oh, the way the Jedi do things," and then obviously with Mortis and then eventually with Mustafar too. So, he's not interacting with the lava per se in those instances, but it's there, as he's facing, like you said, these transformational kinds of things.
Indeed. Indeed. Okay. Well, we're about out of time. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss before we wrap this up?
Well, one thing as far as, we were talking about the clones being so disposable, and again, they just sort of are, dropping one by one until we're left with Fives, Rex, and Cody. And but then, all of their deaths are just like, oh yeah, whatever. But then there's this whole pause for Master Piell's death, which
Mm-hmm.
I get it. He's a Jedi master, and they want to give him his due rights, if you will. But I mean, I kind of felt for the clones in the way that here they were being forced to pause for this, and it really hits home for them what their true place is in all of this, regardless of how individualized or what type of rank they happen to have. And I felt for them in that
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Yeah, no, you're onto something there. I mean, they'll sacrifice dozens or hundreds of clones to save a single Jedi, and then
Mhm.
go on to, like you said, give funeral rites to Evan Piell when they don't, any one of the clones dying didn't slow them down at all over the course of the mission. So, no, you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. The thing is that we see the clones get personalized, and they are all about their mission. They're all about their duty. They're all about that type of honor and stuff like that. That they don't even think twice most of the time when the mission is what's important. We've heard him say it. And, I think back to the Clone
Sure.
Wars movie when Anakin is distraught that he has to leave him behind. And I think it's Rex is like, the mission comes first, sir. They are programmed to understand those type of things. Now, a lot of them evolve their thinking over time on that. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of the things that I think was a theme from the movies is that you had the interchangeable battle droids, and I'm using this as a in quotes, the faceless clones, because yeah, they're all a clone of the same person, and when they put their helmets on, they're already indistinguishable because they're clones, but then they put their helmets on and they don't even look human anymore. They're just as
Mhm.
robotic as the droids when it comes out to it. And now, despite the relationships that Anakin might have with Rex or Obi-Wan might have with Cody in similar type of situations between various Jedis and their commanding clone, in the end, they frequently do get treated as replaceable, as interchangeable. They're disposable. It's not even that so much as that they're fungible. One is almost as good as another, and if you
Mhm.
lose this one, you got two more to take his place.
Right.
Um, so,
Right.
but yeah, that's a good
Yeah, it just
observation.
really hit me. It did.
Mm-hmm.
And then only other thing, I guess, is just from the featurette where they
Mm-hmm.
said that there was 3 possible endings for Sobeck, that either Tarkin would have killed him, which didn't happen, obviously,
Right.
Ahsoka, which did happen, and then there was a third, but they didn't
They never
say
talked
what it
about
was.
it. Yeah.
Did you have any ideas of what could have
No,
maybe been a
I
third?
didn't. I mean, the one that's obvious to me would have been Anakin, but they were definitely trying to do something with that thinking with the way, and they didn't do Tarkin because it would have revealed to the Jedi in that moment that, oh, look where the Republic is going, we need to be cautious about this. But but then they skipped the obvious flag of Ahsoka stabbing him through the back there.
Mhm.
The other one that just stands out to me is maybe Anakin because Tarkin's message is getting through, right? But is that not overkill? I mean, we've already had those signals from Anakin along
Mhm.
the way, slaughtering the Tuscans, yada, yada, yada. So, no, I'm not exactly sure what the third one was intended to be, but that's the only thing that I can really think of that would have made sense for the story.
Mhm. The only other thing that I could have thought of was that OC might have actually given himself up just because, as we were saying, it was better than the alternative of failing and facing Dooku. And so maybe he was hoping that the Republic would actually be a little kinder to him in his imprisonment than maybe what Dooku would have done to him. Or Fives. Maybe Fives would have decided to take him out too.
Yeah, but Fives wasn't even like an entity in this episode. I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't there. He didn't have any dialogue. And this gets back to what we were talking
Other
about in the
than
last episode.
Echo.
Yeah, I mean, for as big a moment as that was supposed to be, for these clones that we followed along since their cadet days, and we didn't even know they were there until that moment in the second episode of this arc. And then the fact that Fives was around was really immaterial after that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So anyway. All right.
There you go.
Okay, well, this is a little bit longer than we usually go for the Clone Wars, but it was worth it because it's a good conversation, and we thank you all for joining us for it. And if you do like the Clone Wars and you want to hear what we have to say about the rest of the series, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. We are available on all the podcatchers that are out there, and if I'm not, let me know, and we'll get that taken care of. We appreciate your ratings, reviews, comments, wherever it is that you listen to the show, and leave those things. We're going to start trying to round that stuff up when we're a little less busy. This is a busy month. But after that, I'd invite you to go check out what we've got going on over retrozap.com with on the Retrozap Podcast Network. All of the previous 1,040 shows are there, which is going to be a lot more than you're likely to find on your favorite podcatcher, as well as the other shows that are on the network. And there's some fun things happening right now on Retrozap. Jay, go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are, where else we can be reached and found on the internet, please.
Yeah, so you can always find us on Instagram and Facebook and reach out to us there at Podcast Stardust. And we also have our 2 YouTube outlets. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. We don't do videos, we just do the audios, but you can still interact with leaving some comments and asking questions. And of course, subscribing to those as well. And then we have all of our Pinterest boards for lots of fun things for everything Star Wars. And if you want to drop us a line, you can do so at our email address, which is podcaststardust@gmail.com. And if you would love some Podcast Stardust swag, and of course, who doesn't, we have our TeePublic store, and just hit up the link in our show notes, and that'll take you right to our store, which has 7 different show logo designs available that you can put on a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, and lots of other fun things, baseball caps and back sacks and all kinds of fun things.
All right. What do you got going in cosplay?
Well, I actually just did an appearance for Mando Monday at a local place near me. And so I was posting a few things there. And so that was a lot of fun on my J.Snips Cosplay Instagram page. So you can check that out, as well as all my other antics as Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, seasons 3 through 5, my 2 different versions of Hera, my 4th sister, and lots of other things as well.
All right, upcoming on the show on Wednesday, it is time for the next installment of the Darth Bane book club. We're looking at chapters 13 through 15, and these are some interesting chapters, so make sure you join us for that. And then on Friday, we'll be finishing off the week with a look at some recent Star Wars news. So thanks for listening to episode 1041 of the Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week, and until next time, may the Force be